Hello, my name is Chris Lee. This is my first YouTube video on this channel in this format. But I like to talk a lot, and I thought that I could have some interesting things to say in one of these like YouTube video documentary or just like video essay type videos. So here I am. And so yeah, this is my first video in this like format, so it might not be the best, but I'm here to talk. And so let's get started. My name is Chris Lee, and I'm here to talk about Christianity, its history, how it has changed in the modern world, and my opinions as an ex-Christian. I want to clarify that me stating that I am an ex-Christian is not to state that I have any ill will towards the religion, just to state that I have lots of personal experience in this topic. I have absolutely no problems with people practicing any faith. I believe that each faith has some truth to it. I do have a problem with how some church spaces are ran and the cult-like environments they display. Again, some, not all churches. And not all Christians have the same beliefs. This video is in no way trying to slander the Christian religion, just to spread information and opinions. With that being said, let's get into the topic. Let's start off with the history of Christianity. Christianity, by definition, is the religion based on the person and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, or its beliefs and practices. Now I'm going to read you some research that I just got, on Christianity and its history and the origins of it and such. The history of Christianity begins with the life of Jesus, a Jewish preacher and a teacher who was later crucified in Jerusalem. His followers proclaimed that he was the incarnation of God. Christianity was originally a small grassroots movement spread within cities by apostles. The support of Roman Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century was important in transforming it into an organized religion with a formalized religious text. In the Middle Ages, Western monks preserved culture and provided social services. Early Muslim conquests devastated many Christian communities in the Middle East and North, but Christianism continued in Europe and Asia, and helped form the states of Eastern Europe and Asia. In the 14th century, the Western Schism and several European crises led to the 16th century Reformation, when Protestantism split off from the Catholic Church. Quarreling royal houses precipitated the European wars of religion. Christianity spread with the colonization of Americas, Australia, and New Zealand. Different parts of Christianity variously influenced the ages of enlightenment, American and French revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, and the Atlantic slave trade. Some Protestants created biblical criticisms, while others responded to the rationalism with pietism and religious rivals that created new dominations. Protestants advocated for religious tolerance, separation of the church and state, and moral reform, while 19th century missionaries laid the linguistic and cultural foundations for many nations. In the 20th century, Christianity declined in most of the West, but grew in the East and the global South. Sorry if I mess up on any of my words, guys. I'm just reading a script that I wrote it, but as we can see, Christianity has been around for a very long time. As all religions do, it started off small and moved by word of mouth by apostles or just those excited to reach out about the stories of Jesus they had heard. Early into this religion, as stated in my research, we see moral issues in how churches are ran, and that's why in modern ages we now know so many different denominations of Christianity. We also see the large effect that colonization has had on the spread of Christianity. I will dive deeper into the aspects of Christianity and colonization, but I must say that I'm a white and Native American mixed citizen, so that is my only personal experience in history with this. There are lots of different marginalized communities who have been affected by the colonization of Christianity, and I would encourage you, after this video, to look into some creators with more personal insight onto this topic. With that being said, Christianity has existed all over the world for a very long time, just not in the same light we see Christianity today. The definition of colonization is the process of taking control of a foreign territory or people, often through force, and sending people from the colonizing country to live there. It can also refer to the act of settling in a new area and establishing control over the indigenous population. Colonization can involve exploitation, cultivation, trade, and settlement. Colonizers came to these people's native lands and forced Christianity onto them. No hate to the ancestors of these people that I'm about to talk about, but their great-grandchildren are in churches to this day disconnected from their original heritage and way of faith without knowing. I found a very insightful online forum of people comparing early church history with early colonial history. Let me show you what I found in the forums that I think is either good points or insightful pieces of information. Let's start with the background of early ecclesial history, a newer Christianity, and an earlier colonial history. On one hand, we have early ecclesial history in the 4th century and used to provide a history of the Christian church from the year to the Niche Council in the 5th century when the Christian state had become a political reality in the Roman Empire. On the other hand, we have early colonial histories. For example, the United States and Australian, written prior to the mid-20th century by the colonists of these countries with much fanfare, marching bands, and tea parties. Both of these forms of histories appear to have certain failures. Now, obviously we have changed since the colonial times in all aspects of life. I just question why we can't or refuse to continue to change. Humans grow and change. That's one of the only guarantees in life, that you will change and you will always continue to change. And most healthy people agree that that's a good thing. So why can we not apply the same logic to our religion that people base their lives around? Just because morals were acceptable 20, 50, 100 years ago doesn't mean that they are okay. I think it's healthy for our society to stay open and always growing. Although we may think we know so much just because we're so much more advanced than our colonial people, that doesn't mean that we should not continue to try and grow to make our society better. And a big part of those societies is organized religion. We've revised our morals before, so I just don't know why we can't go back and do it again. We've revised our morals before, so I don't understand why we can't do it again and just actively work to be better people. Like I said, we have revised our morals, and here's some commentary I found about the revision of the colonial histories. In the later 20th century, revisionist histories start to be written in the later 20th century, revisionist histories start to be written that address some of these failures in the early colonial histories. These are features of early colonial histories recently subject to historical revisionism. 1. The Caconiac-centric narrative. 2. Conflict has been suppressed. 3. The impact on the culture. 4. The issue of genocide. On the subject of conflict being suppressed, I have to share something I found while I was researching, which I'm sure some people are aware of, but I personally wasn't. I could have just missed the lesson of it or something. I did drop out in the 12th grade, but history was always my favorite subject. I could have not been there that day though. Or it's just that we don't want to discuss this in our American history classes, so we can raise our young US citizens to not have bad views on America so that they can make their own opinions. The Australian Frontier Wars Historiography. The existence of armed resistance to white settlement was generally not acknowledged by historians until the 1970s. In 1968, anthropologist W.E.H. Stanner wrote that historians' failure to include Indigenous Australians in historics of Australia or acknowledge widespread frontier conflict constituted a great Australian silence. Works which discussed from the 1970s and 1980s, in the first history of Australian frontier told from an Indigenous perspective. As I'm sure most American citizens are aware of, are the American Indian Wars. In American history books, the Indian Wars have often been treated as a relatively minor part of the military history in the United States, and were treated from the point of view of Americans. After the 1970s, younger historians took the Indian point of view in their writings about wars, dealing more harshly with the US government failures and emphasizing the impact of the wars on Native people and their cultures. Now that we know the history of Christianity, and can maybe put some pieces together of why Christian culture has evolved into the controversial topic it is, I am personally going to be diving more into the evangelical denomination of churches, because that is what I have the most experience in and feel the most comfortable delving into. I also believe this is one of the more controversial denominations up there. Before I get any further, I want to open up the point, is Christianity a cult? Well, the historical definition of a cult is a group or a movement centered around the veneration of a person or God. So in that case, yes. There is also the other side, psychological definition of a cult, an organized group whose purpose is to dominate cult members through psychological manipulation and pressure strategies. It's complicated on this end. I think that's something that can help us defer the opinion of whether some Christian churches are cult-like or not, is something by Dr. Stephen Hamas, his BITE model. There are 4 points to it, pretty much saying that these are signs of cult environments. The first being behavioral control, the second being informational control, the third being emotional control, and the fourth being thought control. With that being said, you can make your own opinions on this. Now, let me read you some paragraphs from an article called The Scandal of the Evangelical Heart. The scandal of the evangelical mind is that there is not much of an evangelical mind. That statement isn't many words, but I do think that it says a lot. Another quote from the article says, addressing the growing lack of depth in the modern Protestant Christianity, spawned by the problem of an anti-intellectual, overly emotive, and pragmatic wave that led Christians to stick with what works and what feels good. Another quote is, growing up, the shallowness of the contemporary Christianity concerned me. In a church context that seemed to focus on good feelings and right vibes, I welcomed a renewed emphasis on thoughtfulness and theological depth. I have a lot of things I'd like to discuss under the controversial topics of the evangelical church, including things like women in the church, fear tactics, the fact that we are reading a changed version of the Bible, the religion being used to push and validate one's own personal views, political power, and much more. As someone who was raised under the standards of being a woman in the Christian environment, I have lots of things to say about this topic from personal experience. In the Christian church, there is an obvious hierarchy, where men are on top while women and children are beneath them. To be a woman in the Christian church is to always be performing for someone, whether it be God or the men anointed by God. From a very young age, as a girl in the church, you learn your role, to be submissive and not question those above you, simply because that is God's way. You learn that you will grow up to be a wife and a mother, and taught that those are the most important things that a woman can do in her life. While I'm not saying that you couldn't want to be a wife or a mother, or that's truly what would fulfill you in your life, if that's truly what you discover about yourself and you want to do that, then go ahead. It's just, I want you to be able to find your own life without others convincing it onto you. You are important as a woman because you are here. That is it. You do not have to be a mother or a wife to make something meaningful out of your life. There are so many strong and successful women that have either always stayed single or just not want children, and that's okay. It's also okay to want to be a wife and a mother. That is the point. You should do with your life whatever you think will fulfill you, not your community around you. This could just be my experience, but I will share it in case anyone else relates. In the church, I feel as if though being a young girl in the church, you don't get the same childhood of young boys in the church. From a young age, you're taught how to act, dress, talk, hold yourself, to be in the ways that are desirable for the men in the church. Why should a young girl even be thinking about marriage yet, and what's desirable for the men around her? Women deserve to be equal in churches, just as they should in all walks of life. Now we're going to talk about the fear tactic. The fear tactic is a very strong thing in church. They read you stories from the Bible with lessons they believe you should have, teaching young children stories of heavens where everything will be perfect, a place with no sin, so easy to get into because God loves you so much. All cute and nice until we get into where we tell these children that if they act out or sin, then they will be eternally punished in hell. A horrible scene where children are told if they sin, they will be sent to a fire-filled horrible place to be tortured for all of eternity because they have sinned. Another aspect of this fear control is pushing stories of the revelation on the children. Any day, God can decide to end the world as we know it and bring all of his children to enjoy heaven with him, except that he wouldn't bring all of his children. Only the ones who have submitted to him and do not live in a life of sin. Those bad children will be left on earth to be suffered by demons in a hellscape until God may decide to give them another chance in maybe 1,000 years or so, whenever he decides, because torture has broken their spirits. Wow, what a story to be told, as children put that in their heart as truth and they believe the words that you're telling them. If you can't imagine, these things are terrifying for a child to hear. And if it wasn't already hard enough to keep up with all the rules and live by them, I want you to know that every sin is equal. Yep, Christians say that in their eyes, every sin is equal. So if you murder somebody, or if you kiss a woman as a woman, they're equal. You're going to burn in hell, according to the Christians. As a child, you are already indoctrinated into the fear of Christianity, and don't you dare question the church or act up, because you will go to hell, or so the Christian church says. And then from fear tactics, I think that we can venture into where we're reading changed versions of the Bible, and on top of that, we use this faith to put our own views onto others. I'm sure that we all know some Christians will use their faith to chastise others whenever some of these chastizations are genuinely not even something to involve with Christianity. They just want to, use Christianity to put their own opinions onto other people. And I'm sure, as we all know, one of the biggest controversial opinions that the Christian church, or some Christian churches hold, is that it is not right to be LGBT or queer. That's not right, according to Christians. And they love to use the Bible to push that onto people. With how much they use the Bible to push not being gay onto people, let's see where they got that from. Well, let me tell you, because this one really upsets me. The verse that Christians will use to chastise the queer community is one from Leviticus, "Thou shalt not lie with man," which was originally, "Thou shalt not lie with boy," meaning that they should not sleep with a boy, as in a child, as in don't be a pedophile, which I'm sure that some of the Christian popes and leaders could learn. But Christians have changed this verse for their own power over others. Churches will also stand behind their religion to spread their political views, teaching children from a young age who is respectable in their eyes and who is not. Usually standing behind the Republican Party, saying things as if though you're demonic if you support the Democratic Party. You will not be supported if you do. This may not seem like a big deal, but growing up in these environments and being fed all this information while also being discouraged to create your own views can create a lot of problems in children. For the children who do not have strength and courage to go against the views they were born into and are immediately indoctrinated into this religion and political sphere without even having the chance to exist as their own people and create their own views. Although let me be clear, although I do not support the Republican Party, that is not the full problem. It is forcing your own views onto children before even giving them the chance to explore themselves, which in general just leads to adults who are followers and will go with the crowd whether they agree or not, without enough courage to stand up for what they believe in, which is a bad trait in most aspects of life. The Bible should not be used to push your own views onto another. So, in conclusion, Christianity has changed a lot over the vast years, but I think that we can see that it's always had kind of toxic roots. And I want to clarify that this video is not a hate video towards Christianity as a religion. It's about the controversial ways the church is led and consequences of that. I believe that there are wonderful true Christians out there, which makes it even more upsetting that people use this religion to put their I believe that there are wonderful and very true Christians out there, which makes it even more upsetting that people use this religion to push out their own personal views and use it against each other. But there are beautiful and real Christians out there who actually do, give out the love of Jesus as it is said to do in the Bible, but I believe that a lot of Christians use the Bible as something to deflect onto others whenever they actually don't use it to look at themselves. Because one of the first things in the Bible is literally that you should love your neighbor as you love yourself, and I don't think that chastising these people is how you would want yourself to be loved, quite frankly. If you felt uncomfortable at any time in this video, maybe you should take that as a sign to do more research into topics like these to create your own opinions. So yeah, I hope that was informational for you guys. Sorry if it's a little messy. This is my first time trying to do an informational video like this. I hope you guys have a great day.